guys, welcome back to Keep It at 99, the most edifying podcast in the world. And I'm joined here today with Mike Georgi. Thank you, Mike, for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So first, we just want to get to know a little bit more about you, who you are. So just give a quick bio about who you are.
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Mike Georgi. I am a servant at St. Mary's, East Brunswick, Coptic Orthodox Church in New Jersey. Married for almost 10 years, 2 kids, and I am a lawyer for my profession.
Great. So we'll get into the topic. Today we're talking about Coptic Christianity in America, specifically in Jersey, and then some differences between regions of Coptic Orthodoxy within America. So, don't really know where to get started, but I'll ask you, what do you think was the beginning of the Coptic Orthodox Church here in America?
So I think what's interesting about our church is that the congregation or the lay people are usually the ones who kind of like drive a lot of the movements. So the church started by a lot of immigrants coming, a little bit in the 40s, a little bit in the 50s, a good chunk in the 60s. And so what's beautiful about our church as well is that the church never just ignores what the congregation is doing. The hierarchy see what's going on, so they accommodate, they shepherd. So Pope Carlos VI saw this and he said they need a shepherd. So he started sending clergy, and it just kind of went off from there.
So specifically in Jersey, what were the first communities? How did they start? How did they come about? We'll start with there. Start with the start.
So whenever you go into any new area, the rite of the church is that the first church is named after St. Mark. That's how it is. St. Mark's the evangelist. He's the one who brought our faith to Egypt. And our first church is St. Mark's in Jersey City. So Jersey City is the first original hub in New Jersey. Jersey City, Bergen, those churches. I would say after that comes St. Mary's in East Brunswick, which is kind of a little more south. And this, you're talking like late 60s, 70s at this point.
So within the early times of the church here in America, specifically within New Jersey, obviously there's a lot of challenges that come with culture assimilation and with bringing, this ancient faith into this world that we live in. How did the church at the time overcome these issues and kind of grow into a flourishing community that it is today?
So I think when you talk about Jersey, of all the places that I've been to, of all the places that I've seen, people that I've spoken to, the main word for Jersey is always community. Community, community, community. I haven't seen anything like it. The people we have in the churches, the bonds, the relationships, it's incredible. St. Mary's, East Brunswick, right, the church I grew up in, it's considered a mega church. It's huge. So there's so many people always leaving for school, leaving for work, leaving for whatever. And anytime I touch base with them, hey, how's it going? How's it been? Nothing's like home. Nothing's like home. I get the same response every time. And when I kind of pry a little bit, why? Community. So I feel like you said, all our, for our great-grandparents, our grandparents, them coming in, they're alone. So they only had each other to bond with, they only had each other to kind of like lean on. So I think the community is what kind of brought them through it, kind of gave them that foundation, that, stabilization. And over time, it just kind of got strengthened.
Like you said, I don't think there's any other community like Jersey. I've only experienced it for a few hours. But I think in general, when it comes to communities, the Coptic community is one of the closest and strongest bonds that people have. And I think that comes from our heritage of being a persecuted church, where people tend to stick together in times of persecution. And I think I like to categorize persecution into 2 things, where there's the physical persecution that our ancestors had in Egypt, and then nowadays it's more of an ideological persecution of our faith here in America. So as the church grew in the 80s and the 90s, how did they wrestle with this ideological persecution of atheism growing in America?
I think like you said, our Coptic church is synonymous with persecution. I'll tell you a story. One of the first priests that Pope Carlos sent, he sent him to a small group of families. I think it was about 31 families, and they were broke. They had no money. So when he suggested they're obviously trying to figure out the finances, his salary, how they're going to build the church, he found that there wasn't enough money to support him, in his salary. This priest had a young wife and a young child. So he could have easily at that point kind of given up and just said, you know what, it's not working out. This congregation is too fragile, too new. I'm going to go back to Egypt. He went to the board and offered to them. He's like, if you can't pay me, that's fine. He's like, there's 31 families. What I'm going to ask of you for my wife and son and young child is that each family host me for one night of the month. 31 families, 31 nights. That's all you got to do. Just provide us shelter, food, whatever, one night a month. So that means every night, every day, this priest would leave and go to a new house with his family. Young child, wife. That's the extent. I mean, people complain when they have to sleep out, one night, right? Out of their beds or whatever. That's the extent of what this priest was willing to do for the congregation to establish. The congregation saw this and like, you know what? No, that's a horrible way to live. We're going to find this money. We're going to, come up with something. And they did. So I think to answer your question, our church relies on God. Our church relies on Christ. And when there's something that's, in adversity, like you said, we're used to, they don't give up. They turn to Christ in prayer, and they just do what they can in terms of education, Sunday school, the community, the families are huge to just kind of make sure whatever problem is happening gets resolved.
I think that story first off is very beautiful, and I think as well, it shows that when people see Christ in action throughout other people, it motivates them to do things that Christ would do as well. Especially like as you just mentioned, like this priest did something that Christ would do. Just ask for something, very simple, very small, to do a great service for them. To do the the Eucharist, the greatest service that we have, and the people saw that and in return also did a great service. I think that that's a common theme throughout Christianity, especially in the Coptic Orthodox Church and not just in Jersey. And I think to further that conversation about Jersey, we're talking about the 80s and 90s and moving into the early thousands. Obviously in the early thousands, there was a lot of, because we are in New Jersey, very close to New York in 2001, obviously 9/11 happened. And so there's a lot of, maybe push for slowing down immigration, slowing down people coming from the Middle East. And so I'm sure that inflicted persecution among Coptic Christians. What was your experience with that like, and the experience of the community? And how did the community kind of get over that hump?
So I remember I was in 9th grade when 9/11 happened. And I remember right when it happened, Egyptians or any Middle Eastern were automatically terrorists. Like I was the automatic moniker. I remember speaking about it in Sunday schools, like in youth. Like servants would kind of address how to deal with it. So our servant growing up in high school was our priest now, Abuna Mark. So I remember, and what's crazy about Abuna Mark is that he was an engineer in the World Trade Center during 9/11. And so he was in the building when the planes hit. And when they hit, I think he was on the 88th floor. Obviously there's fire, people are screaming, he has no idea what's going on. He ends up taking one of his older coworkers and carrying him, physically, literally carrying him 88 floors down, saving his, like risking his own life to save this coworker of his life, to get out. And I remember he told me that he, from 2001 to 2002, probably attended like 90 funerals in that span. All his coworkers, friends, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we definitely went through it. We were definitely, stereotyped or whatever. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a big deal, Community helps you get through it. It's it's not you, so you kind of just brush it off. It wasn't really a big deal. But what was more of a big deal for us was that we had a servant in the church who later became our priest, who was literally a person who lived through it. There's documentaries about him saving this person's life. So I think that was more of the focus than anything else.
Yeah. And again, I think this goes back to the point right before about like seeing Christ-like actions and what that does to a community around it that's centered around Christ and that, looks for, Christian values and stuff. So again, I think that's, I guess, a common theme here in Jersey is the people make the community. So the people who show Christ's light and Christ's image, who are that lighthouse, to the world inspire the community to be that lighthouse? So who are some other people within this community throughout the past that, were really lighthouses of orthodoxy and of Christianity to the community?
So I think the first person that comes to mind would have to be Abuna Pshoi Demetrius. So Abuna Pshoi, he was ordained in 1977 by Pope Shenouda III, and he was ordained in America for America. And he was the first priest ever to be ordained in the United States to serve in the United States. Like, that was something historic. He was ordained in Queens, spent his 40 days in Emba Pshoi, and then came back and founded our church. And this man, there's really not enough words to say about him. What he did for our community, what he did for Jersey, Delaware, Philadelphia. Because obviously he was ordained in 1977. In the 70s, the churches were very few. So if there was, a bunch of families in Philadelphia or Delaware or whatever, the nearest priest to them is Central Jersey. So he would go on a Saturday. He would travel all over the tri-state area, sometimes down the East Coast, to serve these people. And I think he gets a lot of credit for this area, Central and South Jersey specifically. A lot of churches came out of St. Mary's, East Brunswick. A lot of priests, 2 bishops. So Emba Basil, who was auxiliary bishop in the Southern Diocese, I grew up with him in Sunday school. He was one of my peers in Sunday school, right? That's a product of Abuna Pshoi. Emba Gabriel, who is our bishop now, product of Abuna Pshoi. So I think, and it wasn't just like they were older people who came in, experienced him for a few years, went to the monastery and became bishops. Like, they were raised here. They were born and raised here. So he raised them. And to produce that in the diaspora, produce that in a time where the Coptic Church in America is not as stable. Everything is kind of new and people are figuring it out as they go along. I think it just shows you the work of the Holy Spirit in America. For this young priest, he was 27, Abuna Pshoi, when he was ordained. For this young priest to come, start a church, 33 families, build it up, and it produces bishops that born and raised in America that now serve in America. I think it's phenomenal. So I think, to answer your question, the first person I would say is 100% without a doubt Abuna Pshoi. This room is his vision. This room is all him. He made this room. And I remember he made it in 2008. He chose the icons and everything. So yeah, I think I can go on about him forever. So I think, to answer your question, Abuna Pshoi definitely is the first person I would come to mind.
I think that it goes as, I noticed there's something, it's right here.
Yeah,
about him. Yeah. Just shows a testament of, again, I feel like I keep saying this over and over again. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but about like Christ-like figures in environments, in a community. And so I wanted to ask, maybe more specifically about the history of Jersey and kind of getting into more of the logistics, statistics, stuff like that. How did Jersey become as big as it is today?
So Jersey's interesting. The first 2 churches in America in general, I'm not talking about Canada, just in America, are in LA, St. Mark's, and St. Mark's in Jersey City. That's the first 2. And I guess Jersey, just being near the airport, closer to Egypt, I guess it just became a hub. There was a pretty big figure in our community named Ramses Awadallah. He made Mira Mango. I don't know if you ever heard of that or not. Maybe it's just an East Coast thing. I don't know. So his company was pretty big and employed a lot of newcomers. So I think that was a big deal to kind of get people motivation to come. St. Mark's in Jersey City, St. George in Jersey City, they were the first hub. Then Abuna Pshoi comes, starts St. Mary's, which is kind of central Jersey. So now there's 2 locations in Jersey. And I don't know, I guess as time kept going, it became, Jersey in general is the most densely populated state in America. So I guess the Coptic Church kind of took on that same experience. But what was interesting about Jersey in terms of the rest of the country is that we never had a bishop. So Cali ends up getting a bishop, Southern California. The Southern United States, which is comprised of 11 states, 3 time zones, gets a bishop. And then we never had one, but we started getting rotating ones, general bishops, starting like the late 90s. So I think a lot of credit goes to the fathers in Jersey City and Abuna Bishoy in this area that kind of brought a lot of people. Because Pope Shenouda would say when he would come here, he felt like it was an authentic Coptic church.
Yeah.
Pope Shenouda would always say that about us. And so I think that's what attracted a lot of people, because when they leave Egypt, right, and they come here, they're strangers, they don't know anything. So the church is their only like tie back home. And when they see something that's authentic, like, oh, like I can taste and remember how it was, then it makes them feel very comfortable. So I think Abuna Bishoy did a phenomenal job in kind of bringing that spirit here. So I think that's what attracted a lot of people.
And so how did the community kind of go from, or how did it balance keeping that same heritage and obviously making it accessible for kids who grew up here?
So that goes back to your other question, like key figures. So I think the second key figure would have to be Abuna Antonius Tonius. So if Abuna Bishoy was our father, Abuna Antonius was like our big brother. He was the servant, for all of us growing up. I remember he was my kindergarten servant in this room. And he had the Coptic spirit, right? He had the Coptic heritage and the Coptic aura, but he spoke 100% English, and his English was perfect, no accent. And for the early 90s, mid 90s, that was very rare to have a servant like that. And then he became a priest. So he was probably, I would say, one of the first, if not the first, purely English-speaking priest who sounded nice. So you can take a liturgy of his, really enjoy it, Coptic, full Coptic rite, Coptic tune, the hymns, all in English. And a lot of the youth were attracted to that. Like I mentioned Bishop Basil, I mentioned Bishop Gregory. They were both his sons in confession. And so I think that kind of English-speaking figure who was very rooted in the church, able to speak to the youth and deal with the youth, that was huge for us.
Again, I think like that is a big thing. I think especially when you're talking about mid 90s, late 90s, that is very rare for the Coptic Church, especially. And I think even now it's in some parts of the country that is still a rare thing.
Yeah.
To have a priest or a servant that is able to connect with the youth at such a level and still keep that same fire of like the spirit from Egypt. And I think it's very interesting that that happens first in Jersey because there was a lot more maybe not better established, but communities that had more of a hierarchical leadership. Like you said, there was bishop. Jersey never really had a bishop.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show again, like the spirit of the people, and what they bring and what they have to show for. And I think, like you said, by keeping the authentic Coptic feeling, the authentic Coptic rite, like you said, Abuna Bishoy did, it encourages people who, youth who maybe, feel a little bit ostracized from the culture of the church to still keep that, and I feel like Jersey did a very good job of that, especially in the early stages. So I kind of wanted to move the conversation a little bit to talk about the expansion and growth. I remember I was talking to people earlier about how many people go to this church, and the numbers were estimating between 10 and 20,000. That's the numbers I heard. Maybe it's not that much, but that is a lot of people. How exactly does that work? Like how do you build a community with that many people and have a functioning church? Because it's very weird for me coming from the Southern Diocese where churches are very, very small. So we're kind of moving into the differences between regions. But how in the world do you operate a church with over 10,000 people in it?
And what's interesting also about the Southern Diocese is that your churches are small on purpose.
Yeah, they're on purpose that way. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a overseer who's making sure that's happening. So growing up, right, it wasn't always that big. Growing up, we kind of knew everyone. If you look at kind of videos from like Holy Week, Great Friday, the church isn't packed. Like this church is, not all the pews are filled, right? So it wasn't always that big. You knew everyone, you knew everyone's family. But I honestly, genuinely think over time, obviously there's other factors like immigration, right? Like logistical things, people moving. I don't know. I give a lot of credit to Abuna Shoy. I think he attracted a lot of people. I think the fathers in North Jersey, like Abuna Dawood Bebewi, Abuna Gabriel Abdesayed, I think a lot of Abuna Abraham Sleeman, like I think a lot of those fathers also attracted a lot of people. So I think the priests and the clergy really did a phenomenal job transporting Coptic heritage and Coptic spirituality to America. And I think people flocked to that. And I think not everyone obviously wanted to kind of, right, there's suburban East Brunswick, there's urban Jersey City. So like you just had, you had your pick based on, kind of what, socioeconomic or demographic you wanted to be in. But yeah, I think a lot of people just heard of these fathers. I mean, I know firsthand, obviously, from St. Mary's more than other churches that people just came because of Abuna Shoy. They wanted to experience him. They wanted to hear him. My parents came from Egypt because of Abuna Shoy. My father, when he came in 1980, he had a letter from his priest in Alexandria saying, meet Abuna Shoy, keep him as your father confession, and you'll be good. And it was as simple as that. So I think the fathers as a whole, whether it was North Jersey or down here, I think they attracted a lot of people. And then it just kept going. We went from 1 priest to 2 priests, 3 priests, now we're at 6. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think, how does it sustain itself? I think a lot of that generation that was raised by Abuna Tonius and Abuna Shoy, I think they're now the servants, right? So I think they kind of feel how they were raised, and they kind of want to pass that along. They don't want to let it go, so they want to give it to the next generation. And I think that's a lot of how the service runs, because you know what, 6 priests, I don't think it's 10 or 20,000 people. I don't know, maybe 3 to 5. I don't know, but they obviously they can only do so much. Yeah. So I think that's a lot of it's on the servants, a lot of it's on the youth, kind of stepping up. But somehow, through God's grace, we make it work.
It's extremely striking that there are 6 priests, and I heard there's also 6 full deacons.
Yeah.
And I heard there's full Sunday school classes for each gender and grade.
Yeah, they're on average, each gender of a grade has like 35 kids. So 9th grade girls will have 35 girls. 9th grade boys will have 35 boys. So if there's ever anything combined, you're looking at 70 for the class.
Just for 1 grade.
For 1 grade, yeah.
So I heard you're the head of high school Sunday school. How in the world do you deal with all of that pressure?
No, I don't think it's any pressure. I think it's
a responsibility.
We have great servants. So how it works is that each gender of a grade has its own trustee or head servant, right? Trustee. And then right under that trustee, there's 11 servants. So there's 91 servants in all of the high school Usra. But that's just high school. There's also Sunday school.
Yeah.
There's right?
Yeah, of course.
So there's 91 servants in high school. So each class is about 12, let's say, on average. So when you put 12 servants to 35 kids, it helps work. And then of those 12 servants, there's always 1 servant responsible for those 12. So there's 8 responsible servants. And then we have 1 servant who's responsible for the girls. So everything's kind of like broken down to help,
like spread it out.
Yeah. So
like
no
pass
one's,
it down.
Yeah, kind of lost.
I mean, to be honest, it amazes me how a church has gotten to how a group of Egyptians have come to such organization. And it's striking, and I think it really shows like the connection between the Coptic heritage and the American culture. Like that's the benefit of the American culture, is efficiency and organization. And so moving on to talking about the differences in the diaspora between different regions, we'll start with talking about differences between different like countries. So like America, Australia, Canada. What do you think? What do you feel like the biggest differences between, the bigger hubs or the bigger categories of the diaspora?
So I think what you said, I think how your intro was perfect. I think a lot of as the movement of English started happening in like mid 2000s, early 2010s, there was a big push to kind of eliminate Coptic Egyptian culture and just totally like, move away from that. And there's always those debates, I remember growing up, right? Like, this is college. How should we pray liturgy? Should we be all English? Should we keep Coptic? Should we remove Coptic? Where does Arabic? Like, there's always those debates, always those conversations growing up. And I think that the areas that stuck to that, like eliminating the Coptic, kind of focusing on whatever, I think they struggled a little bit, because when you lose the Coptic culture, the Coptic spirituality, you're losing a lot.
Yeah.
You're losing a lot. So I think the best combination, like let's say, for example, Southern Diocese, right? Metropolitan Yusuf. He's the perfect combination of Coptic spirituality, American culture. Like, he's very Americanized, right? He speaks English well. Half his sermons are in English. He's very organized, very on time, right? A very non-Egyptian thing. Very, meticulous, but yet he's as rooted in the Coptic dogma and the faith and spirituality as anyone. And Basarapian, right, in LA, right? These pillars, and if you talk about pillars of this country and diaspora, I would say those two men.
Yeah, of course.
Without a doubt. But I think, going back, I think when you blend the two, when you take the best of both worlds, American culture, right? Organization, efficiency, not being so emotional, right? I think that plus our dogma, which is perfect, right? Our desert spirituality, right? Like St. Anthony, St. Macarius, like, if you take those two and combine them, what's better than that? And I think the areas or the hubs that did that through God's grace, I think they're the ones who flourish the most, because Western Christianity, right? Protestantism, right? All that kind of stuff. If we were to try to copy that, it wouldn't be successful.
Of course not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you just look at Vatican II and the
Exactly.
Catholic Church.
Exactly. It wouldn't be successful. And so I think the point in saying that is that people are hungry for orthodoxy. People always love, what did we used to do? What was the early church doing? Mm-hmm. And there's this church, the Coptic Church, keeps that to a T. And we don't want to lose it. So, and I think even if you hear people complain, if you hear people say, oh, it's too tough or whatever, deep down, everyone appreciates it. Everyone feels safe in it, because it's not, going by the wind. It's rooted. So I think the combination of those two things are what keeps every hub strong. And I think once you lose one of the two of them, it's tough.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a big proponent of the Coptic language, just because it promotes the Coptic spirituality. Like, you lose the Coptic language, I feel like you lose a lot more than just the language, because language is the most important part of any culture. And you think of any culture in the world, you remove their language, you remove 90% of who they are. And so that's why I feel like, specifically with Coptic, like, that's an important thing, because it's the Coptic heritage, the Coptic spirituality that needs to be preserved. Does the Arabic culture or the Egyptian culture need to be preserved? Maybe not. Maybe you move past that a little bit and you kind of, assimilate to the country that you live in and the country that's given you, such an opportunity to live your faith out without physical persecution.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a need to, like you said, to maintain, that spirituality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, when the Arab invasion happened, they were telling the Christians, you can't speak in Coptic.
Exactly.
That was one of the persecutions. And they said no. And they would cut their tongues. They would literally cut their tongues if they caught them speaking Arabic, and they didn't stop. If they caught them speaking in Coptic, and they didn't stop. And you can just say it's a language, but they didn't care. They valued the language. And I mean, that's a whole nother, obviously, aspect. But yeah, I think our heritage is proven enough to be fought for.
Agreed. And I think that's the part about being the Church of the Martyrs, is that, and I think that's why when we have these debates within the church about whether to keep Coptic or not, or about whether to have American Coptic Orthodox Church, whatever it is, the reason why I think people get very invested is because, like you said, it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Whatever side of the argument you're on, it's worth fighting for, because it's a matter of faith. It's a matter of, what do you believe in? It's not just a superficial, whatever.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what you believe is how you live, and how you live determines
everything else.
Life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very important, for sure.
So I kind of wanted to ask, within America, there are, vast differences between the different communities. For example, I'm from the South. We mentioned earlier that in the Southern Diocese, churches are purposefully made small. Mega churches are not something that we really believe in. What are some other differences between the different regions? What are some, we don't have to talk about cons, talk about pros. What are some pros between all of them? And what are some things that we can do as American Copts to kind of help maybe unify the differences a little bit more, if they need to be?
So I think growing up, a major difference that I always would see is the hierarchy in the other regions, Southern Diocese, LA, versus more of the people-centered areas in Jersey, New York, things like that. So I think that was probably the main difference that I saw growing up. Pros for both, right? You have great shepherds. And I can tell you in Jersey, everyone looks up to Emba Yusuf. Everyone listens to his sermons. When he comes for the spiritual days, the conventions, everyone's there. Pros about here, community, which is kind of the first thing I said. Everyone sticks together. Everyone kind of fills in the gap, right? If there's something that's missing, the people fill it in. And I'm so proud to be in Jersey, because, especially in this area, because it's also very strong. Like, a lot of trends happen always, right? Like, there's always a lot of movements, a lot of different ideologies, a lot of different things, and like, this area is very conservative. It's very traditional. And the people the priests obviously first and foremost, but the people also are happy to hold fast to that, are happy to kind of be strong to that. So I think that the pros are the hierarchy, or the shepherding, and the people. But now, as of late, right, and Emma Sarpian said something nice. He said, Pope Kyrillos started or planted the seeds of immigration and diaspora. Pope Shenouda blew it out of the water, right? Like, in Pope Shenouda's 40-year papacy, there's now monasteries in different continents, churches everywhere. He's the first patriarch to enthrone bishops right outside of Egypt. And now the third phase is that Pope Tewodros is coming in and organizing all that. And Pope Tewodros, it's been 11 years, 12 years since he's been a pope. I think in America alone, he's created like 5 or 6 new dioceses.
Yeah.
And you see that organization, you see that breaking it down. I mean, Emba Gabriel is our bishop. Emba Gabriel grew up in this church. He had Sunday school in this room, and now he's the bishop of New Jersey. So I think we're starting to kind of level the playing field out a little bit. But I think those are kind of the main differences of growing up. Maybe it's starting to change a little bit, but I think those are the pros, as we were growing up.
So you mentioned something about how the people were hold fast and with their beliefs and their ideologies. And it reminds me of something that was said earlier today on the podcast by Dr. Zaire. He was talking about like St. Athanasius, and how sure it was St. Athanasius who defended the faith, but it was the people who knew the differences, and it was the people who fought for it. We're talking about like the Zbaha and the Theotokeas and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the same way. Again, you keep going to community field, we keep talking about the same stuff, which is great. But
you can't talk about Jersey without community.
Exactly.
They go hand in hand.
Exactly. So like, and again, I like to reiterate the point. I think that community and that, zeal has to start, like you said, from the top down. It starts from the priest. It starts from Pope Kyrillos, the man of prayer.
Yeah.
That's where that zeal comes from. Yeah. And I think, especially within the Coptic Church, because we put such a big reverence for our saints, like as we're sitting in this room, like we put a big reverence for our saints. In that same way, we want to emulate the life they live. And I think that's one of the best parts about the Coptic community, is that you look sometimes into some other Christian communities, and when there's problems, they split apart. But I feel like in the Coptic mindset, when there's problems, you work together to find that solution. You work together to push for better things. And I think that's why in America, the Coptic Church has grown so much since, because you think about it, it's only been in America for what, like 80 years max?
Yeah.
Something like that.
You can say the 50s, right?
Yeah, since the 50s. So, that makes a huge difference. The fact that it's grown this much in such a little time just shows, and just a testament to, Coptic people working together as a community.
And a lot of things I would always hear in comparison to us with other not even Western, like other Orthodox denominations, is the relationship between the people and the priest. In the other denominations, it was more like a business relationship. Like the priest would almost be like fulfilling a role. Like, okay, baptism needs to be done. Okay, I'm here for that. You need to get married. I'm here for that. A liturgy needs to be prayed. Okay, I'm here for that. Like kind of just task oriented. Whereas in the Coptic culture, and this goes back to the Coptic spirituality, right? The Coptic dynamic is that the priest isn't just a administrator of the mysteries. He's a father, right? Like, and a father in every sense of the word. Like he's invited to your graduation. He gets, he's around for the birthday parties. He's around for the good days, the bad days, the mission trips. Like he's a father. He's intertwined with the people. And I think that is the biggest factor that kind of allows the church to grow. And I think what's incredible is that the new age, right? Because now there's a lot of second generation priests being ordained, second generation bishops being ordained, and they're keeping that same spirit. Like you can pick up the phone and text a bishop and he'll answer you within 24 hours. Easy. Whereas I don't think that's as prevalent in other denominations. So I think that bond of love, that bond of like, father-son, father-child, I think that's huge.
And like you said, that comes from the Coptic spirituality. I remember I went on a mission trip to Egypt last summer, and we're in like some like villages around Minya, and you notice the priest is not just like a priest. Like he's the backbone of the community.
100%.
He is and that's where that comes from. Like you come to America, especially in the early days in Jersey or in any community, honestly, with those priests that came from Egypt, like they were the backbones of their communities.
So I'll tell you a story. There was this family, right, in St. Mary's, who their son had an allergy. He was allergic to fava beans. And so the family the parents took him to Egypt, right, on a trip. And for a little bit, they left him with the grandparents. And the family didn't know whether the parents or the grandparents that he had this allergy. So they're feeding him food. The son ends up passing away. And so the mother goes back home without him. And now the father has no idea that the son has passed away. The kid was maybe like 8 or, something like that. This is in St. Mary's. They literally go to Abuna Shoy and they're like, you're the only one who can break it to him. You have to be the one who tells him. Abuna Shoy has nothing to do with it. He is not a doctor, right? He's not a grief counselor. He's not a psychologist. He doesn't have any of those degrees or titles. But they put that responsibility on him as a father, because a father is not just it's a person of many hats, right? Like that's what a father is. And so he broke the news to him, and the congregation was confident that this news can only be broken by him. And there wasn't even like the only time that happened. So I think these fathers, like you were saying, they do everything, whether it's breaking, good or bad times. They kind of hold that responsibility, and the people honor them for it, which I think is a beautiful thing.
So moving into the more of like the future of the Coptic Church, both in America and specifically more in Jersey, what do you envision in the next 20 years here in America?
So I have a lot of hope for Bishop Gabriel. I think if New Jersey is able to become a diocese, I think that would really help the spirituality and the service a lot, especially if it's through or under Emba Gabriel. I really hope that we're proud of who we are. Because a lot of times I see, youth or people kind of leaning toward other denominations, reading other things, listening to other things, and not really kind of appreciating our church, like the Church of Athanasius and the Church of Cyril and Dioscorus, right? Like there has to be a little bit of confidence in us. So I think that as a whole, we move forward through God's grace. I think our connection to the mother church is really big. I don't think we should ever split or cut from Egypt. I think that connection His Holiness the Pope, the Synod. I think that kind of stabilizes us, like I mentioned before. And from the book of Acts till now, that God doesn't leave the church, right? So I think we'll be fine, just like past generations were fine. I think we're living in an interesting time because everything's kind of new. We're in a new country, and not even just in the country part, but now we're in a new era of that country, right? Like the next generation is here, which is also a big testament to like Metropolitan Yusuf and Metropolitan Serapion for like creating these American Orthodox churches to be able to kind of, accommodate to that. But yeah, I think we're going to see third generation churches where the congregants are American, which will lead to American priests, right? Like not even just second generation Coptic priests, but just American priests.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah, I think we'll see more of that, and I think it's I don't know, it's pretty I don't know, the possibilities are endless, but I think that God doesn't leave the church is his body, and I think that for us to have been sent here, right, whether it's Pope Kyrillos' vision, Pope Shenouda, Abuna Pshoy, right, like these labored so the rest don't have to labor. They were the foundation. Like Abuna Pshoy had every sickness in the book toward the end. He would do dialysis in the altar during Kiak overnight because he didn't want to miss it, and he didn't want to be apart from like us. He would literally be in the side altar, not obviously the main altar, having his kidneys, being cleansed in dialysis, like on a bed, because he didn't want to miss it. And there'd be numerous Good Fridays where he would pass out. Ambulance would come, right? Like he gave his life, literally. He passed away at 59, not old at all. He gave his life for the church, and I think that kind of work isn't just for nothing. I think the next generation will kind of take that torch and move on.
What comes to mind when you say that is the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. But God always provides.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, sure, the work is great. There's so much to be done. But at the end of the day, like, you just have to trust God. As a community, as an individual, it doesn't matter. Just trusting in God and allowing him to work and for you to be the vessel for his grace to be found, just to be the lighthouse. I had one Elijah from DC on the podcast earlier this week, and he said, like, what does lighthouse do? It has two functions: have a bright light, have an open window. That's it. That's all we have to do as Orthodox Christians in this world, is to have a bright light and to have an open window, and God will do his work.
Yeah.
The light itself will guide the ships. Will guide the community and the people. So I agree 100%. I think the future is bright, but it's just one step at a time, and it's not about the big things. It's about the small things.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the book of Revelation, right at the end, it talks about there's going to be people of all nations, tribes, tongues, right? Like that's how God wants heaven. He wants it to be filled with his children, and his children aren't just comprised of just Coptics, right, in Minya or wherever, right? Like it's everyone, and we have a mission, and it would be a big disservice. Like if we know, right, like communion, for example, I can go out in the street right now and I can tell someone, I literally have the antidote for death. If you come to my church, you will never die. You'll never die. Literally, you will never die. And if people understood that, they would go crazy. Like imagine that thought. Like, I may physically die, but I will always live forever, somewhere else. And we have that. Like the church has that. And the church has carried it for 2,000 years. So it's our job to not let the people outside of the church die, or let them miss out on that. Like we have life, and it's our job to share that. So I think that would be a big disservice if we kind of just kept it to ourselves.
I was at a youth meeting in DC last night, the night before. Everything's becoming one day for me. And when Paul was giving a talk, we were talking about John chapter 1. It was a Bible study, and he said, or he's questioning us. We were really like, have you really encountered Christ if you see your brother who's dying and you don't do anything about it? Have you really encountered Christ? 'Cause what would Christ do? Like, have you really encountered Christ for you to sit there and notice the people around you, your brother, your friends, all these people who are going down this path and you do nothing about it?
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that hopefully, like you asked before, like what's the future of the church? That then I would hope we would be better at. And I don't blame us for not being good at it. We went through.
Exactly. I think it comes from the past of,
Yeah.
You're coming to a new, like a persecuted, faith coming to a new country. I mean, you can't expect them to be, everyone come and see.
Yeah. But I think it's different now, at least.
Of course.
And I would hope that we're able to do that. Like even me personally, a couple months ago, someone knocked on my door. Hey, do you believe in Jesus? I said, come on in. Right? We had a conversation, and the guy, he's a nice guy, right? He had his son with him. He has a script. He has verses highlighted in his Bible that he just kind of repeats and relays, but he doesn't understand the Spirit. I would ask him a question. By the time we were done with the conversation, him and his buddy were arguing with each other. And it's like, I have the truth, not because of me or anything, just because of my church. This guy does not have the truth, but he's the one going out and knocking.
Yeah.
And it's like, this guy's going out knocking with a fake product, and I'm at home with the truth, like with life. Like imagine during COVID, right? The people who have the vaccine are inside, and the people who have nothing are the ones who are trying to give you like a mask or whatever outside. But I have the vaccine and I'm inside. I'm not sharing it. And this guy's outside trying to give you some some blue flimsy mask or whatever to try to help you. It's a shame. So I would hope, and I see it already. I think we've done much better in terms of evangelizing, preaching, and I think it can only get better from here.
Well, that's all I have for you. You have anything else you want to say?
I want to thank you. I think it's really cool for you to kind of sacrifice your time and your effort to do this. I think the church, as we're talking about its future and its growth, needs more things like this. I know podcasts are like a new thing, or maybe a current thing that's common a lot of other places. So I think for young kids to kind of feel comfortable, feel that their church is not just some antiquated, irrelevant thing, that they can relate to it, that they can see a podcast, they can see, normal people having a conversation about God, about the work of the Spirit in the church. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's a great service. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, but the blessing is mine. So then, guys, thank you first off, Mike, for coming onto the podcast. It was a blessing having you. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. See you guys next week. Thank you.